And a lot of people question that. And just yesterday, the Washington Times had a big full-page ad, and it talked about, and I just want to read a couple of these, the NEA, National Education Association, is meeting in Washington, D.C., and here's some of the resolutions. The NEA recognizes the importance of raising the awareness and increasing the sensitivity of staff, students, parents, and the community to sexual orientation in our society. The article, Resolution C-14, which labels all movements that are inimical to the ideals of the association as extremist groups that must be condemned. In other words, all those who don't march in lockstep with the NEA's leadership liberal ideology must be condemned, opposed, and ultimately silenced. And the last one, the radical views on the family by endorsing Resolution F-50Z, which puts a homosexual or heterosexual live-in lover in the same category as a husband or wife when it says all retirement benefits for spouses should be equally available to domestic partners. Now, this goes against, 2,000 years of Judeo-Christian values, and if you have people, students, who have learned about these values from Thomas Jefferson, et cetera, they're going to critically look at the question of gay rights and abortion and say, okay, this is right or this is wrong. If you don't teach them those values, you put them in a group, and the only sin or the thing that is prohibited is to inflict your values on somebody else. Okay, I found that when you're talking to different people, the only sin anymore is to not be tolerant of everybody else's sin. Okay, and which leads us to a society where, and just look at the types of advertising we have in politics today. Every day we hear about a poll about abortion, that we should be more accepting of abortion the first 3 months or 6 months. Nobody sits down there and analyzes, is this right or wrong, and regardless of whether or not everybody accepts it, it's still wrong, and as a candidate, I'm going to stand up and fight against it. Regardless, even if it costs me the election, I'm going to stand up. And I ran for Congress in 1990, and it was amazing how many people who were pro-abortion, when you stopped and asked them the question, well, when do you think life begins, and when do you think it should be okay to kill it? It was obvious to me that they had never been asked to actually critically think about the issue. And it's the same thing with gay rights, etc. And I see it. I guess that's one of the reasons why we homeschool, because our child can be given books about George Washington and is taught right from wrong. So hopefully when she grows up and somebody says, is it okay to euthanize your parents because they're no longer a value to society, she will have values to go back to and say, well, it doesn't matter what everybody else is doing. Life is sacred. It comes from God. Therefore, I am not going to support that. It doesn't matter what, well, gee, I was in a class and everybody agreed that we should throw grandmother over the side, so I guess it's okay. And I think that's the big problem. And that's what the, as Clinton, Hillary Clinton wrote, and it takes a village to raise a child. Well, that's the whole group thing. They don't want parents, they don't want religion, and I've got quote after quote in various of these materials where they say we have to get rid of the values that kids have held and religion has held for many, many years. It's become a groupthink mentality. And again, if you have no standards, it's very easy to go into anything.
This creeping secular humanism that's getting into the system seems to want to, if I understand you correctly, separate men from women, parents from children, and this nation from God. Is that a fair summary?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you have to. In fact, one of the quotes in there is that we will replace the values from God with values of society, meaning the two are not the same. See, 40 years ago, everybody was against abortion. 40 years ago, everybody was against gay rights or special rights for homosexuals, allow them to marry and adopt children. These days, we've gone, so many people believe it's okay where we have to finally draw the line in the partial birth abortion. But, 40 years ago, if a candidate was pro-abortion, he never would have been elected.
Yeah.
But again, if you have no objective right and wrong, who's to say that my liberalization of my values isn't just as good as yours? And that's basically what I think the education system wants to do.
Well, just so that the viewers understand where those of us who represent this program and are in the Knights of Columbus are coming from, and to paraphrase James Carville, it's the behavior, stupid. We want to make sure that they understand that. If we're spending more and getting less from our educational institutions, why not return to the traditional education methods? That's really my question, both to the viewers and to you. Why shouldn't we dump this outcome-based education and just go back to those traditional values?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. First of all, from the kid's point of view, if you eliminate the testing, the individual grades, you make it a lot easier. I could tell you numerous stories from different people about, you know, the kids not getting any homework. Kids are watching 3 to 4 hours of television a day. And when I grew up, we were in sports till 5 or 6 o'clock, came home, ate dinner, and we did 2 or 3 hours of homework. Apparently that's not happening these days because somebody's got time to watch 3 or 4, and that's the average amount. Number two, if you teach traditionally, you have to have teachers who are competent. Now, as you know, the NEA has fought every sort of basic competency teaching or standards for teachers. Okay? Merit pay, all that. Okay? It's much easier for me to be a psychologist to you, to give you feel-good self-esteem, than to teach you about Shakespeare, to teach you about the Constitution, to teach you about algebra or whatever, okay? So basically, from a teacher's point of view, it makes it a lot easier on them. A friend of ours in the high school down in Calvert County went 7 or 8 weeks into the quarter and hadn't had a graded test or exam, and then finally in the whole quarter all she had was graded group exercises, okay? So that's a lot easier on the teacher. But the major #1 goal, I believe, is that they want to create a new society, and if they're just teaching algebra, they can't destroy your values. They have to have psychological testing, psychological counseling, which the family is not allowed to find out about. They have to be able to give your kids contraceptives, because then when the kids use contraceptives, they get promiscuous, and then they need counseling. So you're basically creating a need for more and more government spending, okay? You can't possibly say cut educational spending, because then we'll be cutting out health care for children. I mean, 30 years ago, we didn't get our health care from the schools. Our parents were responsible for the health care, you know? We didn't, you still can't get an aspirin without a signature. You can get an abortion, which is another subject. But we basically created this before care and after care, so they want to take over your children.